Contribution by Sid. He makes the people around him, rather than them making him. For Carlton's sake, let's just say that he's a few years older than me, or even better, that I'm a few years younger than him. But on a more serious note, he took me in when I was 14, and whilst I'm sure I would have survived somehow if he hadn't, I'm extremely pleased and grateful that he did, because my life would certainly have turned out very differently without Carlton's influence. Unlike so many immoral people he and I have encountered through the course of business and life over the years, I always have and always will repay Carlton with the most valuable currency in our game: loyalty. I can attest to the fact that Carlton, from a very young age, has always been very streetwise, one of the most switched-on people I've ever come across, in fact, and that's one of the reasons why he's made it to the top of several of his chosen fields. For example, you don't become one of London's most feared and respected bouncers without being pretty sharp. Of course, being handy and extremely violent goes a long way too, but Carlton possesses the ability to step back, analyze all possible moves available to him, and choose his timing carefully, which is one of the many things he's tried to teach me how to do over the years, and I could not have wished for a better mentor. When I was 17, Carlton got me a job on the door with him, and he always kept me close, taking me under his wing, and that was for my benefit, not his. But he never once asked me for anything, not one favor or attempt at using me for his own personal gain. In '88, when the illegal rave scene was really taking off, I used to be involved in organizing the raves for extra cash, as well as working the security with Carlton and his men. Although it was great fun casing warehouses, staying a step ahead of the old bill by keep changing pager numbers, and fitting out a warehouse with a sound system in a few hours, working and earning my stripes on the door was where it was at for me. You may have read the story in Muscle of when Trigger tried to murder Carlton on the boat, so given my closeness to Carlton, you can only imagine what I felt when London's rumour mill started to turn, and someone shot at Carlton became, in Chinese whisper style, someone shot Carlton. I was working at Club UK in Wandsworth that night, and when I heard shots had been fired on the barge, I raced through London to make sure he was alive. I don't know how I kept control of myself or my car until I'd found out that Carlton wasn't dead, but I remember it hitting me like a ton of bricks, just how much he meant to me, even back then. Carlton had an army of doormen and heavy-duty muscle about him in London long before he ever moved to Essex, a fact which I think a lot of people choose to forget, because it suits their own agenda to pigeonhole him that way, but he is his own man who's always gone in his own direction, regardless of what's going on around him. A leader, not a follower. He makes the people around him, rather than them making him. Carlton had his own unique ways of working the door back in the day, the most prominent being that on an average shift, us lads wouldn't see him all night, until he came out towards closing time to pay us. But even on the coldest of winter nights, he was always sweating like he'd run a marathon. One night, I went into the warehouse thinking, where the fuck is Carlton? And when I eventually found him, dancing away in a dark corner, he talked me into trying a pill, about which I was reluctant, but I trusted the boss and gave it a go. Remember that scene in Rise of the Foot Soldier with the E? Well, that wasn't about me. It was based on a man called Ice, but that was my exact experience as well, down to a T, except the fact that we finished up filthy bloody dirty at the end of it all, thanks to the state of the warehouse we'd broken into. There was never a dull moment on the door with Carlton, that's for sure. Given Carlton's levels of humility and generosity, both in terms of cash and opportunity, and as a man who respects the criminal hierarchy and chain of command so much, I cannot believe how many people I've witnessed trying to backdoor him over the years, usually where a little bit of extra cash is on the table in the short term. I've lost count of how many times I've picked up a tool and told Carlton to leave it to me, but he's rarely allowed me to follow it through and says, "There's more than one way to skin a cat, Sid." I guess if everyone who ever made an attempt at passing Carlton over got served up, we'd probably be banged up by now, and for a poxy couple of quid at that. Instead, for those who simply can't be taught the rules, Carlton's usual approach is to close twice as many doors in their face as he could have opened for them in life. So to those of you reading his book now, wondering why he didn't call you with that new number, surprise. He knows exactly what you did and what you're about, and you came off worse. There are many people out there that will refer to Carlton as their brother, cousin, or as family because they want to be associated with him, what he stands for, and all the benefits that can come with that metaphor actually being true. But 9 out of 10 of them are full of shit and have no real basis for their claim. These chances are almost always the ones that cause the grief within our circles, and their phones are usually out of range when they're required to repay a favor or put a situation right. Carlton's parents, may they rest in peace, knew me well, so well in fact, that they'd not only tell me off on occasion, but if I'd done something wrong, even as a young man, they'd clip me round the ear and set me straight. If they were both still here today, they could still do the same and receive nothing but an apology from me, because they were very good people who I respected immensely. I have too many stories to tell involving Carlton's folks, but when I was training at Talbot's gym in Leytonstone, Norman drove over about 4 times a week for almost 2 years to train with me, which was as much an honor as it was a pleasure for me. Carlton was the best man at my wedding. There simply was no other choice, and he was there at the hospital within hours of my children being born, both of whom don't just call him uncle, they only know him as an uncle. There are things that Carlton has done for me, which I can't discuss in detail, that the average person probably wouldn't even do for their own flesh and blood. He's treated me like a real brother since I was a boy, and as far as we're both concerned, I am his brother. We share a kind of unexplainable, emotional connection, which can best be understood by my telling of what happened at his film premiere. On the set of the film, I'd found certain things difficult to watch, as they were just too close to home. But when I sat in that cinema and saw certain things playing out again before my eyes, I had to get out of there. I had reached a point where I couldn't take any more reliving, so I headed for the gents to be on my own and gather my thoughts. Carlton was sat with the film people, and he couldn't have seen me slip out the door in the dark, but as I looked up at the mirror after splashing my face with cold water, Carlton walked through the door. He hugged me, looked at me and said, "I know, bruv." I didn't need to ask why he had also slipped away from the crowds. I already understood. For anyone who's been introduced to me by Carlton, you will know me as his foster brother, the title by which he refers to me, a term which isn't an empty one, and something he doesn't say lightly. From me, that love and respect is reciprocal, and he is a member of my family. Carlton has connections throughout the UK and internationally. It's actually quite something to see him go to work on the phone fixing a problem or putting a deal together. But as I've witnessed over time, he didn't go looking for these connections. He doesn't go out of his way to pal people up. They come to him and introduce themselves, leave their number or business card and tell him to call, should he ever need anything. My honest belief is that Carlton could have been even further up the ladder within the international criminal underworld, had he chosen to, but he recognizes the true meaning behind "heavy is the head that wears the crown." Congratulations on all of your achievements, Carlton. Thank you for all that you've ever done for me. And never forget that I'll always be right here should you need me. I love you, brother.